In June, U.S. production companies sued Koreans who had been creating subtitles for American dramas. The production companies of 6 American programs sued 15 internet users for making subtitles for U.S. dramas and circulating them online without permission. The companies argue that the practice is an obvious form of copyright infringement. According to a survey, about 40% of Korean adults have watched U.S. programs online, and one of the largest sites in the country has about 200,000 members. U.S. dramas have grown increasingly popular here in Korea with a soaring number of fans. And different arguments have emerged on the accusations.
I've heard these people make subtitles with good intentions in order to help Korean viewers gain better access to U.S. dramas. It's not for their own financial benefit, so I think the U.S. drama production companies are overreacting.
I think the U.S. production companies made the right decision to sue Korean subtitle makers, as it is an obvious copyright infringement even according to the global standard. So Korea should reflect on these illegal acts, and the people who import U.S. dramas legally should also put more effort into making better quality subtitles.
Korean subtitle makers only make subtitles for the dramas that were produced overseas and have already been introduced to Korea by someone else, so they might contribute to promoting American programs in Korea. But I think we don't need to hold subtitle makers legally responsible for this. U.S. drama fans in Korea actually have no other way to legally buy or watch the programs.
It's considered copyright violation from the copyright holder's point of view. A lot of people have used a lot of illegal channels to watch U.S. dramas, so I think it is right to proceed the case against subtitle makers.
Creating subtitles for U.S. dramas, is it simply a fan activity or is it an illegal act?
Thanks for tuning in. Welcome to Upfront. I'm Na-hyun Kyung.
Hello, I'm Yoo Jong-soo. An increasing number of Koreans are uploading American television programs online with the Korean subtitles. Are these the harmless act of fans, or is it fact an illegal act? On today's Upfront, we get some answers.
And joining us today, first we have Mr. Park Kyung-shin, a civil society organization offering legal advices here in Korea from OpenNet. It's called OpenNet here in Korea. Thank you for joining us today. And we also have Professor Song Se-ryun, a law professor from Kyung University. Thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you.
Now, let's start today's discussion by looking at a piece of document here. It's a summons by the Korean police issued on June 20th to people who have been uploading Korean subtitles for American soap operas. It says you are required to report to the police department's cyber division for questioning over copyright infringement, and the basis for the summons reads, this is about you uploading subtitles for the accuser's dramas and movies on the web, and it goes on to say, if you don't report to the police without a valid reason, you can be arrested.
Mr. Park, OpenNet made an official statement about this case. Would you please elaborate about this statement?
These people did not upload American dramas. They did not. What they uploaded was text files that are Korean translation of the scripts of American dramas. There's a world of difference between the two for copyright protection, because people who have watched American dramas without Korean subtitles, with a sparse understanding of the script, may not watch the same dramas again if they come in on television or movie theaters. So uploading dramas themselves definitely affect the economic interest of the copyright holders. But uploading just the text files, uploading just the Korean translation of the script, I mean, nobody's going to just read the script in Korean and say, oh, okay, I watched that. I watched the House of Cards. I read the 13 episodes of House of Cards, so I don't need to watch that. Nothing like that's going to happen, right? So uploading just text files of Korean translations does not affect the economic interest of, well, if it affects very little of the economic interests of the copyright holders or the producers of the American dramas. So I think that should be made clear from the beginning. So this is a criminal prosecution. This is the use of public resources to punish somebody who did good for everybody.
I think that could be one interpretation and correction that you made there. But without permission from the original authors and producers, their actions could be interpreted as illegal, no?
Right. There are two different arguments you can make. One is economic argument, and one is obviously legal argument. Legal argument side, I think it's pretty clear that script is a copyrighted material, and translation of that script is a derivative work, which is covered by, for example, in Korea, Copyright Act, Article 22. And only person who can create or use that original derivative work of the original work is the original creator. So if anybody else does it, that is a violation of the Copyright Act. Now, it's not that simple because the Copyright Act, much similar to the inventions, there are dual purposes. One is to protect the authors for their creative activities, but at the same time, they want to promote the culture and the industry associated with that product. So you have to, as a society, balance those two. Now, the balancing act in this case appears in other section of the Copyright Act, under the name of fair use. You can use the original material without being in infringement of that the author's right in certain situations. Now we use the fair use doctrine a lot at school because for educational purposes, to an extent that we can borrow or we can use the text copyrighted materials. For the reporting purposes, for even the parody in the US, those kind of uses are okay. But in this case, we're talking about the commercial product, cultural product, drama, which is made for economic gains, if anything else.
Who's economic gain?
For the gain of the creator, which is, American productions. Now, I guess the argument can be made that, well, they're not in this market. Before they move into this market, they have no economic gain that they can look forward to. So you can say, well, they're not losing any money. But you can make another argument, which I think is more convincing, that market making is another activity that those companies engage in. Whole marketing and advertising or teaser campaigns before things are brought out, that is in calculation or within the strategy of making a profitable gain later on. So if you look at the whole process of the gainful activities and corporate activities, then you could say that any kind of infringement in any stage of that process can be prosecutable.
Mr. Park, what I heard is that most of the subtitle makers don't have any commercial motives or money gains from creating the Korean subtitles. Considering that, is it still a copyright violation?
Right. Copyright violation is neutral to whether the copying was done for economic purposes or not, at least generally. So technically, there can be a copyright violation. Now, soon, I'm going to talk about legally why this may not be a copyright violation. But before I get to that, I want to comment on what Professor Song just said. Yes, the copyright holder can create teasers for publicity. While creation of these Korean subtitles have served as a great publicity for American dramas that have not come into the Korean market yet. because some people got a taste of how good those American dramas are, and some of them put their opinions on the internet. Oh, I want to see House of Cards coming in. I want to see that on TV, and the Korean cable, PPs, program providers, they use that as a cue to, okay, well, we're going to import, we're going to buy House of Cards. So the creation of subtitles has really, of course, has not served the fan sub, we call them fan subtitle makers. So fan sub makers. Creation of subtitles has not really served fan sub makers any
interest,
any economic gain, but only publicity gain for the producers of American dramas. And you should also keep in mind that even if this is a technically copyright violation, there is no country in the whole world, as far as I could see, that has used, that came down with the wrath of prosecutors, with the swords of criminal prosecution to punish people who only created, who only translated the script of a full audio-visual product. Because audio-visual product is, I mean, how much does the script, how much does only the script account for in the whole movie that has all these sounds and visuals, right?
Your point is that in Korea, it's unfair for them to be criminally prosecuted,
Yes.
is your point.
Yes.
And one of the points that you did make earlier was that the problem with mass distributors. So you think that those circulating the contents on the internet are more responsible for infringing on copyright.
Sure. I think that one analogy that I can make is let's say there are 3D movies out there, right? And there are people who are distributing 3D movies themselves. And then there are people making the glasses for 3D viewing. Well, you need 3D viewing glasses to watch 3D movies. And prosecutors are going after the glass makers and not the distributors of the 3D movies themselves.
Okay.
This is what the situation looks like.
Okay. And would you also say that then the subtitle makers are being a little bit of a scapegoat here then?
Well, scapegoat is a strong word, but there is still a distinction between the legal and also kind of a cultural argument here. The benefits that the American movie makers or the drama makers get from the fan sub makers, I think it's totally incidental. They didn't ask for it. They have no arrangement to do that. They should say, because of the gains they see in market making and all those, they should say thank you, but that's just a word, right? For the economic gains as well, the threshold for making it a prosecutable criminality depends on, first, whether you get the commercial gains or the monetary gains. But at the same time, the other side is whether there is a impact upon the market and the industry. I think the $1,000 in 5 years is a very, very minimal, because you can make any kind of argument that this activity has caused more than, in the movies or the drama case, you can make arguments for millions and millions of dollars.
For distributors of movies themselves, but for distributors of subtitles?
Right. I think that goes to your another point. You seem to think that the subtitle is not very important to the whole package of these things, but I kind of disagree on that, because if you see the movie and if there's no sound, not the sound of the effect, but the conversation or the dialogue, who would watch it? The same thing. If you are not understanding the storyline narrated by the actors, and or in this case translated by the fan subs, the movie itself is useless. I think, although if you look at the percentage of it, you can make it, well, it's only about 5% or 10%. But the impact or importance or how integral it is to the whole creation of the work, I think is very vital.
Sure. I mean, 3D movies are useless without 3D movie glasses. But would you go after 3D movie glass makers for copyright violation of the 3D movies? No.
Right. I mean, I think some might argue that, maybe your analogy, it's understandable, but at the same time, subtitles are crucial in understanding the contents and story of the movie. I think that's what Professor Song is, his point in this case is.
Sure. I mean, 3D movie glasses are essential for enjoying 3D movies. It goes the same way. All I'm saying is that that one is essential doesn't mean that it is important enough to trigger criminal prosecution.
I think that analogy is kind of tenuous because the 3D glasses is not a derivative work of the movie itself. Translation or the fan sub is. So it goes directly to the language of the act that protects the derivative work. So
sure, but I'm talking about the economic impact. I'm talking about how much the meanings of dialogues account for in a whole movie. I mean, the movie files, there are still dialogues there, right? They can, anybody who went through secondary education in Korea has studied some English, they'll understand some, right? The movie files don't go out without any dialogue at all. There is English language dialogue. So what they are doing is they're just adding very little bit to the, they're just facilitating the enjoyment of those files, by a little bit. I just don't think it calls for criminal prosecution or arrest.
Right. I would agree that it's not kosher to prosecute in this case because legal argument aside, from an economic point of view, the movie makers or drama makers had benefited from these people. So there is a kind of wisdom issue. Is it wise to go after these people? After all, these people are making the market and spreading the what kind of entertainment value there is for these movies. But when it chips it down, it's totally the choice of the producers. Whether to go after these people or not. I mean, we could say, well, it's stupid to go after these people when you're killing the market, but that's a stupidity reserved for the producers.
So you all certainly accept the notion, that argument that the subtitle makers truly promoted this U.S. soap opera even before this the movie or soap opera available to Korean market.
Right.
Right.
The same thing as anime, those cartoons that Japanese make. There was probably a bigger case, and there are a lot more cases on that. Same arguments and same arrangement goes. Before those Japanese anime was licensed and was available in the U.S., there were a lot of people who were translating the work and making it available. Now, did that benefit the anime makers in Japan? Sure, they did. It was a huge market even before they got there. But does that insulate the fan sub makers from the legal liability? No. But should we prosecute it? Is it wise to go after them very hard? Probably not.
Local cable PPs may have some argument there because these subtitles will facilitate watching pirate copies as opposed to watching it on cable. But then again, if you really talk about the economic impact, usually cable PPs license the products on minimum guarantee deals with no running royalties. So the how many people are really watching the dramas does not really affect financially cable PPs because they already paid their minimum guarantees.
But that's one side, though. The number of the audience or viewers increased, then their advertising fee also can be increased, isn't it?
Well, good argument there. If there can be some, but I mean, again, we are speaking about a possibility that has not been confirmed. Here, it is the U.S. copyright holders who have filed complaints with the prosecutors. Cable PPs are not involved here. I don't know whether any cable PP has really claimed, has made a claim that they lost any money.
Are we able to evaluate at this point whether the American drama producers have been at an economic loss? Legally
Probably they'll come
speaking.
up with some numbers, but I don't think it's that important to them either. The letter they got is usually called a cease and desist letter, which is to alert them more than anything else that we are ready to take in legal action, so whatever you do, you stop. You spend money to do that because you have to hire law firms. If you're anticipating certain profitable activities, I think that in Korea, it's been about 10 years and a certain American drama has made a big splash and people started watching American dramas in droves. So maybe, I think that they could think that this is, the time is ripe, that this market is ready for a wholesale kind of a mass scale market making. So maybe that's why they are plunging the money to first warn the people that we are ready to move in, and second, any kind of copyright violation will not be tolerated.
So for more, we've invited two more experts on the show. We have cultural critic and professor from Hongik University, Professor Michael Hurd, and we also have Professor Lee Hae-kyung, who's teaching in the UK. So thank you very much, both of you, for being on the show today.
Yeah.
Oh, no problem.
Okay, thank
Pleasure to
you
be here.
for inviting
Now,
me.
let's start with you first, Professor Hurd. What's your view on this situation?
Well, in a way, I would take it as a compliment, although that sounds a bit strange, because there was a time when the United States, most of the studios, the content makers, as it were, didn't really care very much about this market. And now they realize this market is very important and they're losing money. So they care about protecting their copyrights.
Professor Lee, what is your take on this matter?
My understanding is that fan translators or fan servers, they are the most enthusiastic and knowledgeable fans of U.S. drama in Korea, and they translate U.S. drama not for commercial reasons, but for the personal, social, and cultural reasons. They may translate the drama in order to improve their English skills, or simply they want to share the drama with other fans. That motivates these fan servers.
You mentioned a term called fan serving or fan subtitling. Can you tell us what that means?
Yeah, fan subbing means fan translation and subtitling of TV drama, film, or animation. And this is part of fandom. And fan subbing, those who are doing fan subbing can be seen as the core and most loyal member of fan community. They are very often very well organized. They work as a group, and many groups want to work effectively, and some of the members the membership tends to be very international. That means that they can work 24 hours per day or 7 days per week without any constraint of time, the limit of local time. That makes those groups quite proactive and very, very productive. And some of the groups are famous for high quality translation, some for the speed, and some for their choice of niche titles, non-mainstream titles. And many groups, they are eager to innovate their process. So in a way that except that they are working not for money, they look like professional translation groups, professional publishing companies.
So Professor Lee just mentioned that it's an act of fandom. Now, Professor Hurt, is that a fair assessment?
I think a lot of people kind of naively think, oh, we're helping the studios. We're helping distribute their content. Well, frankly, the studios don't need anyone's help. In fact, they are hurting the studios' properties, which is why they're suing them. Because as I talked with an entertainment lawyer before this interview, the point that the law looks at is to what extent these copyright infringements hurt the property that they're trying to protect. And I think allowing people to upload subtitling that assists in illegal downloading and consumption of these products, illegal is illegal. And there can be exceptions to this, and there are lots of exceptions to that in Korea. But I think Korea, in the end, and Korean netizens doing this are only hurting the Korean market in the end by their activities.
Professor Lee, copyright violation of Korean dramas have also taken place in China and the Southeast Asian countries. What kind of stance do you take on this?
In my view, today, one of the most effective ways for cultural dissemination is fan translation and subtitling. And this is a way to move cultural content beyond the existing national, geographical, cultural, and linguistic boundaries. In that sense, I believe that the rise of the Korean wave during the last 10 or 15 years was indebted to heavily to fan activities such as fan translation. And again, similarly, the wide dissemination of Japanese TV drama and animation in Asia in 1990s, you can think of Asian countries such as Taiwan, Hong Kong, and other parts of Asia. And this dissemination was partially driven by amateur fan translation and distribution of translated moving images.
Now, but some might say that those acts should still be within the boundary of law. Professor Hurt, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
The one thing I will say is I think that the kids who are involved in this present lawsuit, it's unfortunate that they're going to be, I think the examples are trying to make, the studios are trying to make an example out of them. And they want to make the story that other people tell to their friends to discourage them from doing this, saying things like, oh, did you hear about that kid? Yeah, he lost his house, his family lost his apartment, he couldn't go to school because of these lawsuits. And the worse it is for him, actually, the better it will be for the studios. So I think people should think about that and be careful.
All right, thank you very much, both of you, for being on the show. Now, Professor Hurt just mentioned that the American producers are perhaps making an example out of this case here. Then the next question is, why now? Why are they doing this now? This has been going on for more than a decade.
Right. It's totally from economic motivation, I think. If there's no market, if there's no demand, there's no incentive to go in to take any actions. I think that by deliberate act or by just waiting to have the market formed, you see a lot of different examples. In China, there were a lot of illegal copying of movies. American producers didn't do anything for a while. Now that China is doing relatively better, now they are moving in and start prosecuting. Same story in Korea as well. We had a lot of illegal copies going around, but you don't see that many these days. So I think it's makes sense from a business point of view to move in now, because it's been 10 years. We have identifiable demand and the handsome market in Korea.
Well, are there any similar cases overseas where the production companies sue the subtitle makers?
Well, you don't see many. I think there was one case in Poland, which was later dropped. You don't see many producers going after these subtitle makers because they recognize, I think, the kind of gain or the benefits they get by having these fans go around making the market and creating demands. So they are wise not to go after these people. But I want to focus on kind of the other aspect. We've been talking about from the creator's point of view, what kind of rights they have and what kind of infringement they have. What about the rights of the fans? What about the rights of these people who want to enjoy it and develop culture out of it? That's the other side of the copyright law, where the society decided to promote the culture and the industry. I think the Professor Lee mentioned that the Korean wave has benefited a lot from the fan activities. I think the consumption and the enjoyment of cultural products has changed over the years because of the internet and other factors. So the doctrine of fair use that permits the other activities should be broadened. I think that you can make a pretty good argument on that. And probably at some point, based on that, the fan sub activity might be a tolerable one. But at this point, we haven't gotten that far.
Right. I think that there are not many cases. As far as I know, there is no criminal prosecution of creation of translated subtitles in any part of the world. I mean, Professor Lee mentioned how fan subbing actually helps dissemination of culture across the national boundaries. Well, for that, because of that reason, translation, when the Copyright Act, when the world's first Copyright Act was born back in 1710, translation was not considered a copyright violation. The very first case under the English, England's first new Copyright Act, the court decided that translation of Latin books into English actually requires a lot of labor and benefits a lot of people in England and should not be considered copyright violation. Same thing in the US. Back in 1853, you are aware of Uncle Tom's Cabin, right? Mark Twain's novel was also translated into German for German immigrants within the US. There, the court said translation is not considered a copyright violation. I mean, we still see the vestige of that ruling in our own copyright law. For instance, it's not a copyright violation for the blind to create the I forgot the word, the text for the blind. You know, the text that you can teach, you can touch by reading, because translating the normal text into the touchable text allows dissemination of culture into the people who otherwise could not enjoy that culture. And because of this, because of the public interest involved in translation, even now the international treaties make an exemption for translation this way. If the other country does not prosecute or does not impose a liability for translation, then our country does not have to enforce copyright law against translation of the work from that other country. You know, the first country that does not enforce copyright violation against the translation in their own country, right? So it requires some reciprocity, and if there is no reciprocity, As to translation, you can just choose to do only to the extent that the originating country, where the work originated, only the originating country does, right? Here it's American dramas, right? Let me tell you what the originating country does. This is the, I'm going to read from U.S. Department of Justice manual titled Prosecuting Intellectual Property Crimes. And it says criminal prosecution is only for copying and distribution, but not for derivative work. Okay? Derivative work will be criminally prosecuted only when it was profit motivated. Fan subbing was not profit motivated. So to the extent that the originating country does not enforce copyright law against translation, our prosecutors can choose not to, enforce it against our own people, while keeping in all the obligation of international treaties.
But still, they are going ahead with the case as of now, as we speak.
We don't know.
Is it highly likely at this point? Would you say that the accused will be fined, or if they will be facing jail time here?
Professor Song already mentioned the Polish case. Polish prosecutors received a complaint and they started investigation and took them 8 years. And then they decided they'll not prosecute. It might be the same case here. So it's difficult to say whether prosecutors are doing anything actively or dropping the case. No one knows. But I'm hoping that they look into this side of the law before we make the argument in trial.
So if the prosecution or the police go with the case here in Korea, then wouldn't it be fair for the English or the Korean subtitle makers to prosecute them and not the distributors? I think that's also one of the points here.
Right. On the books, there is a code section that provides a punishment. It's 5 years or $50,000, up to 5 years. So you can prosecute them, but as Professor Park mentioned, in the United States case, I think it's better suited for the civil trial rather than the criminal trial, because what's at issue usually is the economic gains and what kind of profit losses they experienced. So in that sense, probably I would think that it's a waste of taxpayers' money to prosecute against these kind of minor offenders that does not create too much economic impact one way or the other. But it's on the books.
Subtitle makers say they are creating subtitles purely for the sake of making it easier and more fun to watch foreign programs. As we don't have any official standard for translating them, sometimes things are translated incorrectly, which could hinder the original value of the content. It's not about bringing economic losses for the content producers. If the copyright holders agree, we can develop a variety of different legal channels to introduce foreign TV programs. For example, if a producer solely targets the Korean market, it can open a unilateral channel that is reserved for Korea. The most important thing is the will of copyright holders to open up that channel. Having more legal channels could enhance the quality of translations, and translators could also continue what they're doing. The accusations of copyright violations require due process. Translated subtitles, which are derivative works, should be viewed as another creative work with its own copyright. I hope this controversy serves as an opportunity to change the perceptions of both the subtitle makers and the viewers about the overall subtitle making process.
All right, so that was an interview with a professional translator. Now, with the nature of this topic, of course, we try to talk to people who had done the subtitling job before, but most of them were hesitant to talk on camera, though we did have someone who was willing to do an interview via email. So let's see what this person had to say.
I posted my first fan sub back in 2009, and I did it regularly for 3 years or so. When you love something, you want more people to experience it and enjoy it with you. First, I should clarify that taking legal action against fan subs are perfectly in the rights of copyright holders. However, the number one reason we make fan subs are to share the shows we love with more people. Obviously, there are some who are doing it just to study English or maybe for the internet fame, but this is a time-consuming and difficult job. You can't do this for long without strong affection and devotion to the shows. Also, they could have just contacted them and gave them a warning. That would have been more than enough. We know it's a gray area at best in terms of copyright violation, and we've discussed it multiple times. We never worried that much since fan subs have always been tolerated, and we expected there would be some kind of warning before an actual legal action. However, I have to say this won't get rid of fan subs. I am just worried fan subs will instead be dominated by people who are in it for profit, like so-called web hard companies. I know some say fan subs are preventing a good service to establish itself, but I believe the lack of good services is why fan subs exist.
What would be the best way to protect our fans as well as the material providers and also the subtitle makers in a way to find a common ground to benefiting everybody?
That's a difficult question.
That's $1 million question.
I think I need to write a PhD paper, or somebody else needs to write a PhD paper for it. Well, I think that we have to make the rules clear that criminal prosecution will take place only in these and other situations. By doing so, copyright holders can strengthen their defense of their work in those areas. It will, by limiting the coverage of criminal prosecution, the copyright holders can say, "See, if you do this, you will be criminally prosecuted." So those harmful activities, the copyright holders can inform the public that you can do subtitling, you can do these other things, but if you do this harmful activities, then you will be criminally prosecuted. So that will send a message across, and then people will enjoy the copyright, creating subtitles, things like that, but they will not do really harmful activities. So to that end, actually OpenNet, with the help of MP Park Hae-ja, submitted a bill that limits criminal prosecution only to a violation that causes damages in excess of the US 1,000 the US 1,000 Korean 1 million won over a period of 6 months. And that bill actually passed the Cultural Committee of the National Assembly.
Oh, an opposition lawmaker proposed that bill, right?
Proposed that bill, and it already passed, which means both the incumbent and opposition agreed on that bill, and it's at the legislative committee, which is kind of the last stop. So we are already 90% close to making Korean law like the copyright laws of all other countries that limit criminal prosecution only to a serious violations. So with that bill pending, I'm hoping that prosecutors don't go too rushedly on this case, because the law may change in a few weeks.
Professor Song,
What's the best course of action in your opinion?
Well, if you look at the copyrighted materials or inventions the same way, you have two different characteristics in it. One is commercial or the economic or the right-based, the bundle of rights. But at the same time, you have this public policy kind of issues where you have to benefit the society by promoting the culture and the industry. I think the solution has to take into account those two aspects of it. This cease and desist letter or the lawsuits have a chilling effect, and it does protect the creators, but it also kills the market and kills the spirit of those fans. It could be a legal argument to look at the fair use, scope of the fair use to broaden it, or it could be up to the prudence of those people who make those original materials to see that this impact goes far beyond the profit motives or the business enterprise. From the government's point of view, we're briefly talking about the Korean Wave. The Korean Wave also represents not only the business interest or those activities of the private groups, but the soft power of Korea. So this is not just a private matter, but we have to think about what kind of ramifications it would have to Southeast Asia or other audience countries that enjoys Korean movies and songs and like that. So what do we do? I think the first step, as Professor Park mentioned, and I wholly agree, that we need to be educated with this and others, where the boundaries are in this country and other countries, and how we can make the balance between the business cases or the economic gains together with cultural development and the soft power ramifications.
All right, well, you both had some good answers there to that $1 million question. Thank you very much for being on the show and talking to us today.
Good to be here.
And we will certainly keep an eye on this matter as it develops, right? And that's all we have for this week's Upfront.
Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.